Good afternoon, everyone. This is Bernd Christian Giels coming to you once again from beautiful Cape Cod. Today is Monday, August 3rd, 2020, and this is episode 30 of my YouTube channel, which I originally launched on June 25th of this summer. I'm here on the grounds of the Wocoit Bay Reserve on Cape Cod, and behind me, right back here, you can see a traditional structure of the Wampanoag people, who are one of the original peoples here on Cape Cod, who were here long prior to those of my own ancestors and other European Americans. So today in episode 30, I'm going to be talking about an issue that has been put on the back burner in a lot of the media coverage in the last several months, as much of the news these days is focused on the coronavirus pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And yet, despite the fact that the pandemic is making much of the news these days, this particular issue is one that has not at all disappeared. And that issue that I am referring to is the issue of climate change. So here today on Cape Cod on Monday, August 3rd, we're having a very warm and humid day. There's hardly a cloud in the sky today, and it's very humid despite the breeze. And we are here in the state of Massachusetts currently under a tropical storm warning. The entire state of Massachusetts is currently under a tropical storm warning as we await the arrival of the storm that has currently been battering Florida and is now approaching the Carolinas. Now, it's not unusual at all for hurricanes and tropical storms to hit the United States of America in August, but this year has already been fairly unusual in the sense that we are already to the letter I in the alphabet for the storm names, and it is only August 3rd. So for those of you who are storm and hurricane fanatics or chasers, you, I'm sure, are already aware that this has been quite an eventful hurricane season, and it's only August 3rd. We are now approaching the statistical peak of the hurricane season in the Atlantic Basin. So today in this episode, like I said, I'm going to be speaking about the issue of climate change, and I'm going to be referring specifically to one particular phenomena of concern. There are multiple manifestations of climate change that we can expect to see occurring throughout the world in the coming years and decades. Those changes obviously vary according to what part of the world that you're in, but some of the major changes that are expected and that are already occurring are changes in precipitation patterns, increasing frequency of heat-related phenomena like heat waves in the summer, as well as exceedingly mild winters, and changes in the variation and the variability, I should say, and intensity of storms throughout the year, both mid-latitude storms in the winter season, as well as tropical storms, cyclones, and hurricanes during the warm season in the northern hemisphere and the Atlantic and Pacific basins. So here in the state of Massachusetts, like I said, we're having a very warm, humid day, and we are expecting a tropical storm conditions to arrive by tomorrow evening, is what the current weather forecast holds. Now, 2 years ago, around this time, in late July of 2018, there was a record-breaking heat wave that was devastating the country of Japan. And that heat wave culminated on July 23rd of 2018. And on that day, the Kumagaya Meteorological Observatory in Japan recorded an amazingly high temperature of 106 Fahrenheit or 41 Celsius. That sort of heat was without much precedent in the country of Japan. And days before that, as of July 15th, 200 of the 927 weather stations in Japan had recorded temperatures at or above 35 Celsius, which is the equivalent of 95 degrees Fahrenheit. There were over 1,000 people who died from heat-related illnesses. And the next year, in early 2019, researchers with the Japan Meteorological Agency began exploring the circumstances behind the heat wave. And what the researchers did to study that heat wave from July of 2018 was to use something called attribution science. Now, when I was studying atmospheric science as an undergraduate student at Texas A&M University in the 1990s, the realm of attribution science did not actually formally exist. From what I've learned in my research, attribution science is something that was developed in the early 2000s, and this science specifically seeks to understand how the influence of climate change may be seen in events such as floods, droughts, heat waves, and even events like coral bleaching. In the most recent years, especially in the 2010s, we have seen more and more coverage in which there has been speculation as to whether this or that extreme weather event is something that would have not happened in a world that is not currently undergoing the degree of climate change that we are now witnessing. Now, that is, in a sense, a challenging task, to be able to say with certainty that any particular event definitely happened because of some existing set of circumstances, in this case, the actual current state of the atmosphere, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and so on. To give you an example, to be able to say that a certain heat wave or a certain hurricane was made much worse because of climate change is, I would say, in a sense, as challenging as it would be to say that if I had left for work 5 minutes earlier on a given morning, then I would have definitely not hit a traffic jam, or I definitely would have not witnessed a traffic accident, or I definitely would have arrived at work a certain amount of time much earlier. There are so many factors that influence the course of events in a single day, let alone something as large as the atmosphere, that to be able to decisively predict and say that yes, this event happened and or was made worse because of some other event or factor, that is indeed a challenging thing to be able to assert with 100% certainty, most certainly. So I ask you then to consider attribution science and trying to understand climate change and how it manifests in current weather events within that framework of thinking about your own life, your own daily life, and the many things that might influence the outcome of your day on any given day. So, like I said, if you leave for your job 5 minutes early in the morning, what is the number of different things that could happen because you left for work 5 minutes earlier than you usually do, or 5 minutes later? You could end up being in a traffic accident because you hit a particularly bad patch of dense traffic that you normally wouldn't if you had left at the time that you customarily leave. So there are many factors that can contribute to how your day unfolds and how a certain storm develops and unfolds over a part of the world. So anyway, in early 2019, scientists took some time to apply attribution science to try to better understand how the heat wave that had impacted Japan in July 2018 had been potentially made worse by climate change. And according to an article published in the Scientific Online Letters on the Atmosphere in June 2019, the conclusion of this research paper noted that the heat wave of 2018, quote, could not have happened without human-induced global warming. That it would not have happened had global warming not been occurring. Now, Japan, being unaccustomed to this level of heat, obviously found itself insufficiently prepared to deal with the consequences of a protracted number of days featuring extremely high temperatures. And this is something that we're witnessing in other parts of the world. I was listening to a radio presentation within the last couple weeks, and the subject was actually the response to the COVID-19 pandemic in Finland, but somehow the issue of climate change got wrapped in because Finland was having difficulty dealing with the pandemic and with how to handle schooling, and then you add in climate change, and they were having a heat wave. And so in northern countries near the Arctic Circle, for example, Finland, Sweden, Norway, as well as even more temperate nations such as Japan, the United States, Germany, France, and so on, a number of these nations, many of whom constitute the developed world, are facing a warmer world and the problem of an infrastructure in place that is not adequately designed to handle a warmer world. And that's what unfolded in the country of Japan in July of 2018. Over a period of many days, as I noted, numerous observing stations throughout the country set record high observed temperatures. Many people became ill with heat stress and heat exhaustion. And like I said, the researchers looking into that heat wave came to the conclusion that that particular heat wave would not have happened without human-induced global warming. Now, obviously, as we continue to load the atmosphere with more and more carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, we are going to face the prospect, the likelihood of increasingly warm years in the years to come. And in a warmer world, we will therefore face the prospect of a higher frequency of heat waves and the disruption that heat waves can cause, especially in countries and communities that do not have the infrastructure in place to deal with such high temperatures. Now you might be asking, well, what are the other potential consequences and reasons why I should be concerned about climate change? Like, what is that going to concretely mean to all of us in the coming years and decades? Well, in a warmer world, not only will we need to have different infrastructure in place to handle living in a warmer world, but it's also going to impact our productivity and our ability to work in certain professions. A 2019 Reuters article that I looked up noted that the United Nations International Labor Organization suggests that a rise of 1.5 degrees Celsius by the year 2100 could lead to a 2.2% drop in working hours, which is equivalent to 80 million full-time jobs, and ultimately costing the global economy $2.4 trillion. So a warmer world won't just be inconvenient at times, and it won't just mean we'll have more frequent heat waves, but it will also mean that we are going to find it more challenging for people to be able to do certain professions in which they work outdoors. So consider, for example, people like lifeguards, agricultural workers, even school teachers who take out their children for recess in the early afternoon. Any professions that feature spending long periods of time outside in climates that are at least temperate in nature will likely find the challenge of dealing with warmer conditions to be an increasing problem in the coming years and decades. Here in the United States of America, one of the major sectors that will be impacted by a warmer world is agriculture, and therefore the agricultural labor sector. So when you think about all of the people that work in the fields of America, both American citizens and undocumented immigrants, when you consider all of these people that work in this industry, a vital industry, vital to the health and well-being of our country, and then you overlay on top of that demanding industry, a warmer world with greater frequency of heat waves and other weather-related issues, we face the prospect of a workforce that will become increasingly challenged to maintain its current levels of productivity. And that has serious implications for our gross domestic product, our GDP, for the livelihoods and health of agricultural workers, not just in one calendar year, but over the lifespan of those who work in that sector. The World Health Organization states that heat stress linked to climate change may cause an extra 38,000 deaths per year between the years of 2030 and 2050. So, in the coming years, as the world becomes warmer, and as we face the consequences of that warmer world, we are likely to see more people dying of heat-related stress and illness than we have in past decades. And as I said, the WHO, one of their estimates they recently made was 38,000 deaths more than previously was typical per year within the years of 2030 to 2050. Now, you may be wondering about other climate change issues besides heat waves, and there are several other concerns. One of them is what I alluded to at the beginning of this episode when I talked about the fact that the state of Massachusetts is currently under a tropical storm warning. That is not exactly a typical weather event here in Massachusetts for the entire state to be under a tropical storm warning. And though I haven't dug into the data over the history of weather observations kept in the state of Massachusetts, I would be willing to risk a guess that the likelihood of the entire state of Massachusetts being under a tropical storm warning this early in the hurricane season is quite small. So, on the subject of hurricanes, I want to talk about two recent, memorable, catastrophic storms that hit the United States of America, that hit the continental 48 states. One of those was Hurricane Harvey. We are coming up on the 3-year anniversary of the devastating impact of Hurricane Harvey upon the coast of Texas and the city of Houston. According to research that I looked up, the hurricane dumped approximately 27 trillion gallons of water, of rainwater, on the state of Texas. That's an astounding amount of water, and not something that we can easily contextualize in our day-to-day lives unless we do some creative calculations, which I did. So, 27 trillion gallons of water. According to the Institute of Medicine, as noted on WebMD, a man is recommended to have 3 liters of water per day for optimal health. I would say at least 3 liters of water, from my understanding. So, in a world with a population of over 7 billion people, let's round that and just say that there were exactly 7 billion people in the world. And let's say that they all required 3 liters of water per day. So let's get rid of the variation between what men and women need. So if 7 billion people each need 3 liters of water to drink per day to sustain their health, the amount of water that fell on the state of Texas during Hurricane Harvey in the year 2017 was so much that you could provide drinking water for 7 billion people necessary to sustain them each and every day for a period of 4,870 days. Let me repeat that because it is an astounding statistic. The amount of water that fell on the state of Texas during Hurricane Harvey was enough water to sustain the demands for drinking water of every person of a population of 7 billion human beings for a period of 4,870 days, or more than 13 years. That's astounding. 13 years of a water supply for every human on the planet, assuming a population of 7 billion people. That is an extraordinary amount of water to have fallen in one single hurricane event in one state in 1 year. 27 trillion. 27 trillion gallons of water. And here's another fascinating statistic to give you a sense of how profoundly damaging and potent Hurricane Harvey was. The weight of the water that fell on the city of Houston, Texas, within the city limits of Houston, Texas, was so immense that it temporarily led to the sinking of the city by 2 centimeters, which is about 1 inch. So all of that water that fell on the city of Houston, Texas 3 years ago was so heavy that the entire city of Houston sank by 2 centimeters, 1 inch. That's profoundly amazing that that volume of water fell on one American city. One last fascinating statistic I found was that the destroyed property materials, so all of the materials that were destroyed by the storm, and what I understand is that means the storm surge, the flooding, anything related to the water brought into Texas by the hurricane, the damaged materials from property attributable to Hurricane Harvey created 8 million cubic yards of garbage just in the city of Houston. 8 million cubic yards of garbage. Now, I'll leave you to find some interesting ways to transform that bit of data into something that you can grasp. But just think about that. 27 trillion gallons of water. The amount of water that every person in a population of 7 billion people could drink collectively for over 13 years. That's an amazing, amazing amount of water. Now, the second hurricane that I'm going to speak about before I close this episode is Superstorm Sandy. This storm happened 8 years ago. It struck the mid-Atlantic and New England in late October and early November. If you go online and research Hurricane or Superstorm Sandy, the dates that it is noted to have been a storm of note were October 22nd to November 2nd of 2012. It was also known as other things besides Sandy, Hurricane Sandy, and Superstorm Sandy. It was also called the Frankenstorm, as I understand it, in honor of the fact that it happened near Halloween. It was also called a blizzicane because once the storm moved inland, it manifested in the Appalachian Mountains as an incredibly early season snowstorm. And it was also called a snoreastercane, again, because of the snow and the nor'easter type quality of the storm's impacts. That storm was also historic, and one of the reasons it was quite unusual and thus made history was the unusual storm track that the hurricane took. I can still remember actually watching that storm develop and looking at the weather forecast models from the National Hurricane Center, and as the storm moved into the Atlantic Basin and moved within some proximity of the Bahamas and then continued to move northward, the weather models began producing all sorts of interesting spaghetti trails of the predicted path of the storm. Some of the weather models did the traditional prediction of sending the storm out to sea, basically moving eastward near the latitude of Cape Hatteras, as is not uncommon for storms to do. But other weather model predictions brought the storm into New England, and then still others showed it making an extreme left hook right into the mid-Atlantic. And that is ultimately what the storm did. After moving northward for a period of time, a blocking high-pressure system to its north forced Hurricane Sandy to no longer move northward and instead move westward right into the tri-state area of New Jersey, New York State, and Connecticut. The storm surge, the rainwater, the storm winds all created a historically damaging impact upon that tri-state area. And I welcome you to research that storm's history. I will post a couple of links to some of the information sources that I looked up to learn more about the data, the history of the storm. So these are two hurricanes, Hurricanes Harvey and Hurricane Sandy, that have both happened in the last 10 years, that have been historic storms. Harvey was extraordinarily destructive. It lingered over the state of Texas for days, unleashing torrents of water. Some measuring stations reported up to 60 inches of storm rainfall. And then there was Hurricane Superstorm Sandy that devastated the Mid-Atlantic and the tri-state area after doing a left hook and plowing right into the state of New Jersey. Some of the research that I've read over the most recent years suggests, and I believe it's correct, it's not just a conclusion, it's based in sound data. Some of the research suggests that the steering currents in the atmosphere are slowing down, that the jet stream itself is becoming more winding, and that weather patterns and particular storms are becoming stuck over places for longer periods of time. And that is a very concerning thing, because in a warmer world, we will have an atmosphere that will hold more moisture. And so the potential for devastating hurricanes to unleash incredible torrents of water in future years is going to grow. As the atmosphere warms, the atmosphere will be able to hold more water, and as it holds more water, the potential for a storm to develop and unleash a catastrophic flood will go up. I'm not saying the actual frequency, I'm saying the potential for it. But then eventually, in time, as we continue to experience more warming, the frequency of such storms should theoretically increase as the atmosphere continues to warm year after year, and thus hold more moisture to be available in future storms in the coming years and decades. I'm going to close by briefly sharing a little bit about my own most fairly recent personal training. Last year in 2019, I attended a training through the Climate Reality Project. Now, the Climate Reality Project is a brainchild organization of former Vice President Al Gore. And this training is basically designed to empower concerned Americans to learn more about the science and realities of climate change, and then take that knowledge and learning and that new network of people that they've discovered in the training, return to their home communities and become resources in their communities about the current and future issue of climate change. When I returned to Massachusetts last year in 2019, after completing that training in Atlanta in March, I created a PowerPoint presentation in which I profiled three particular impacts of concern specific to Cape Cod, where I currently reside. Those particular impacts which I profiled are increased sea level, or sea level rise, a change in the frequency and severity of storms, both mid-latitude winter storms such as blizzards and nor'easters, as well as summer storms, also known as hurricanes, as well as thunderstorms. And finally, the implications of a warmer climate for us in regards to the season of the year in which we deal with pests such as rodents, fleas, ticks, mosquitoes, and the like. So if you become a viewer of my channel, if you are a subscriber and you would like to see a copy of that PowerPoint presentation, you can drop me a line and I will be happy to forward that to you. At some later date, I will learn how to actually share the PowerPoint presentation online so that it's a piece of material that you can view without having to request it of me. I'm still building out my YouTube channel and learning how to market it and how to create a viewership. So as I do that, I'll be learning more about how to share a variety of information with you, my viewers. So in closing, I want to thank all of you for watching today. My name, once again, is Bernd Giels, and I have been speaking about, in this episode, the warming world. And I invite you to read some of the resources and materials that I have noted in the information box here on this episode page. And I will hopefully be back either later today or tomorrow with the next episode. So until then, thank you for watching. Please tell your friends, family, colleagues, and your pets about my YouTube channel. It's been great spending another day sharing some more information and some more knowledge with you. You all have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Be wise. Think of both your own care and the needs of others during this challenging time. And I will be back soon. Have a great day.